Eleanor sat alone by the window of her small flat in the heart of London, staring at the rain streaking down the glass. The city outside seemed alive, bustling with people hurrying under umbrellas, yet she felt a strange emptiness within, as if the life outside belonged to someone else. Her hands rested on the thin blanket draped over her lap, and she could hear the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall, marking the relentless passage of time. For Eleanor, life had not always been this quiet, this lonely. Once, laughter had filled her days and the warm presence of her family had given her a sense of belonging. But now, at 35, the shadows of loss and regret seemed to follow her wherever she went. She had lost her parents in a car accident when she was only 19, and her younger brother, whom she had tried so desperately to protect, had drifted away into his own life, leaving her with an aching solitude. She reached for the cup of tea on the table, her fingers trembling slightly. It was the kind of trembling that comes not from cold, but from a heart burdened by memories too heavy to carry. She took a sip, letting the warmth soothe the storm inside her, and tried to focus on the little details of her flat: the faded wallpaper, the chipped corner of the bookshelf, the photograph of her family smiling on a summer afternoon. Each object was a reminder of what she had lost, yet they were the only pieces of comfort she still had. Eleanor worked at a small bookshop nearby, a place she had chosen not because of passion, but because it offered a quiet life and few obligations. The work was monotonous, yet it kept her days structured enough to prevent her mind from wandering too far into despair. Her customers rarely spoke much, and she rarely initiated conversation, preferring the solitude that had become her closest companion. But today felt different. There was a heaviness in the air that she could not shake. Even the rhythmic tapping of the rain against the window seemed mournful, echoing the sorrow that had silently grown inside her. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass and whispered into the gray sky, "I don't know how much longer I can keep going like this." A sudden knock at the door startled her. Eleanor turned, startled by the unexpected sound. She rarely had visitors, and the thought of someone entering her quiet sanctuary sent a ripple of unease through her. Carefully, she approached the door and peeked through the peephole. A man stood there, soaked from the rain, holding a worn envelope. His eyes, however, were not unkind. There was something familiar in the way he looked at her, something that tugged at a memory she could not place. Hesitantly, she opened the door. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft but wary. The man held out the envelope. "This is for you," he said, his voice steady. "It's urgent." Eleanor hesitated, glancing at the envelope. There was no name, no return address. Her heart raced as she opened it, and with trembling fingers she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed neatly but coldly. "Meet me at the old pier at midnight. Everything you thought was gone is not lost. Come alone." She read the words again and again, disbelief mingling with a strange sense of dread and curiosity. The old pier had been a place of childhood memories, a place where she had once run freely with her brother, where laughter had echoed across the water. But that was long ago, and the pier had since become a place of forgotten promises and lingering shadows. Eleanor sank back into her chair, the envelope clutched tightly in her hands. What could this possibly mean? Who would know enough to find her, to send the message like this? And why now, after all these years of solitude? Her mind raced, recalling every detail of her past, searching for a clue, an explanation. As the night deepened, Eleanor found herself staring at the ceiling, her thoughts spinning in circles. The envelope sat on the table like a silent sentinel, daring her to act, to step out of the quiet life she had painstakingly built around herself. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to pretend it had never arrived, to let the night pass and continue as she always had. But another part, a small, fragile part that had not been entirely extinguished, whispered that this might be her chance, her only chance to reclaim something she had lost long ago. By the time the clock struck midnight, Eleanor was already walking down the empty streets towards the pier, rain soaking through her coat, her heart pounding with fear and anticipation. She did not know what she would find there, nor what awaited her, but she could feel that her life, the quiet, sorrowful life she had known for so long, was about to change forever. The pier was shrouded in mist, the river's surface a mirror of gray clouds and dim city lights. Eleanor's footsteps echoed hollowly against the wooden planks, each step carrying a mixture of fear and curiosity. She clutched her coat tighter around her, though the chill of the night seeped into her bones. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to retreat into the safety of her lonely flat, but something deep inside, a memory long buried, propelled her forward. As she reached the edge of the pier, she saw a figure waiting. A man, tall and cloaked in shadow, stood motionless, staring at the water. The faint glow of the street lamp illuminated his outline just enough to make him seem both real and unreal, like a ghost conjured from the past. Eleanor's heart pounded so loudly that she feared he might hear it. "Eleanor," the man said, his voice a soft echo over the water. "I didn't think you would come." She froze. The familiarity in his voice was both comforting and terrifying. "Who are you?" she demanded, though her voice trembled. The man stepped closer, and the dim light revealed his face. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She knew him. It was Daniel, her childhood friend, the one who had shared every secret, every laugh, every tear with her before life and time had separated them. But he had vanished years ago, leaving no trace, leaving a void that Eleanor had carried like a shadow ever since. And now, here he was, standing before her, alive, yet carrying a weight in his eyes that she couldn't yet understand. "Daniel, is it really you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. He nodded, a sorrowful smile touching his lips. "It's me. And I'm here because you need to know the truth, Eleanor, about everything that happened, everything that was taken from us." Her mind reeled. Memories long suppressed surged forward. The day his family moved away, the whispered promises to write, the empty mailbox that never received a single letter from him. And now here he was, standing before her, alive, yet carrying a weight in his eyes that she couldn't yet understand. What truth?" she asked, her fingers trembling as they clutched the envelope still damp in her coat pocket. Daniel looked away for a moment, staring into the dark river. "Not everything as it seems. Our families, the accident. It wasn't an accident, Eleanor. There are things you were never told, secrets that have been hidden from you for years, and I need your help to set them right." Her mind reeled. A cold shiver ran down her spine. "Help? What are you talking about?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "There are people who think they can control everything, even our lives. They've been manipulating events, shaping the paths we've walked, and now they've made a mistake. They thought you would never find out, that you would remain in your quiet little world, oblivious to the danger surrounding you. But you're awake now, Eleanor, and there's no turning back." Her mind spun, the gentle rhythm of the water below contrasting sharply with the storm raging inside her. Fear, confusion, and a spark of hope collided in her chest. Could it really be true? Had her entire life been a carefully constructed illusion, one she had been blind to until now? "Why me?" she asked finally, her voice barely a whisper. "Because you've always been stronger than you think. Because you never gave up, even when life tried to break you. And because I can't do this without you." Eleanor swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She wanted to turn away, to escape into the safety of her loneliness, but a small, defiant voice inside her urged her forward. For so long she had been trapped in sorrow, haunted by the ghosts of the past, and now, perhaps this was her chance to reclaim her life, to confront the shadows that had lingered too long. I don't know if I can, she admitted, tears brimming in her eyes. You can, Daniel said softly, taking her hand in his. And you will. We have no choice. The time has come to face what has been hidden, to bring the truth to light, together. As Eleanor looked into his eyes, she felt a flicker of courage stir within her, fragile but undeniable. The pier, the river, the mist, all seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them standing on the threshold of a journey that would change everything. And in that moment, the rain, that had begun as a soft drizzle, turned into a steady downpour, drumming against the wooden planks like a heartbeat, signaling the start of a night she would never forget. The rain followed Eleanor and Daniel as they left the pier, its cold drops striking the pavement like silent warnings. Eleanor walked beside him, unsure of every step she took. Her mind buzzed with questions, too many, all at once, crowding her thoughts until she felt as if she could hardly breathe. Daniel, meanwhile, remained quiet, his face tensed with a hidden urgency. Every so often, he glanced over his shoulder, as though expecting someone or something to appear out of the darkness. It was this behavior more than his cryptic words that frightened Eleanor. She had known Daniel as a boy who laughed freely, who always looked forward, but the man walking beside her now moved like someone hunted. They turned down a narrow alley away from the river. The weak glow of the streetlights barely reached the cracked pavement, leaving everything in a dull haze of gray shadows. Eleanor hesitated. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, unable to keep the trembling from her voice. "To my place. It's safe. For now." "For now?" The words sent a chill through her, sharper than any winter wind. "Daniel, you're scaring me. What is happening? Who are we running from?" He stopped walking and faced her. Rain dripped from his eyelashes as he looked at her with an expression caught between apology and fear. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I should have explained more, but I needed to get you away from the pier. It wasn't safe." "Safe from what?" He held her gaze, then slowly exhaled, as if finally accepting that he could no longer shield her from the truth. "There's a group, a powerful one. They've been watching your family for years. Mine too. What happened to your parents wasn't an accident, and my disappearance, it wasn't by choice." Eleanor felt her heart drop. She took a step back, the air suddenly too thin. "No," she whispered, "that can't be true. The police said—" "The police only knew what they were told," Daniel cut in, his voice stern but not unkind. "They were given a version of the story, a convenient one." Eleanor pressed her forehead. The ground seemed to sway beneath her. "All these years—" She swallowed hard. "Daniel, why didn't you come to me sooner? Why now?" "Because I didn't know where you were," he said, emotion cracking through his words. "I was kept away, controlled, monitored. You have no idea how long I tried to reach you, how many times I nearly gave up." His voice broke, and for the first time that night, Eleanor saw the years of pain reflected in his eyes. It was not the fear of the moment. It was the fear of everything he had been carrying alone. "And now," she whispered, "how did you find me?" Daniel hesitated. "Because they lost track of me. I escaped 2 nights ago. I don't have much time before they realize what happened. That's why I had to find you immediately. You're not safe, Eleanor. Not anymore." The words hit her like cold water. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of the trembling in her hands. "You keep saying I'm not safe, but why? Why me? I've lived quietly for years. I haven't done anything." "That's exactly why," Daniel replied. "Because you don't know what you're carrying. You don't know the truth they've been hiding from you." Her mind raced. Her memories felt like shattered glass, sharp,
scattered, dangerous to touch. She tried to speak, but no words came. Instead, she followed Daniel deeper into the alley, her breath uneven. After several minutes of silence, they reached a small brick building near the end of the street. It looked abandoned, its windows boarded and the door faded with age. Daniel pushed it open with effort, revealing a dimly lit staircase leading downward. Eleanor hesitated at the entrance. "Daniel, what is this place?" "Somewhere they won't find us tonight. Trust me." She didn't know if she trusted him. How could she? Everything he said felt impossible, terrifying, yet the sincerity in his eyes, the urgency in his voice, it all felt painfully real. And deep inside, where she buried the memory she never wanted to revisit, Eleanor felt a whisper of something she couldn't name, something that said he wasn't lying. She followed him down. The basement room was small, cluttered with old boxes, papers, and a few worn pieces of furniture. A single lamp illuminated the space with a warm but tired glow. Eleanor sat on a dusty chair while Daniel locked the door behind them. He knelt in front of her. "There's something you need to see," he said. He reached under the old desk and pulled out a metal box with a heavy lock. Eleanor watched as he opened it with a key she hadn't noticed around his neck. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, and documents, handwritten notes, maps, letters. Daniel handed her a photograph. It was her family, her mother, her father, her brother, and Daniel's parents, all standing together in the garden behind her childhood home. Eleanor couldn't remember the moment the picture was taken. That alone frightened her. "Look closely," Daniel urged. She did, and then she froze. Because behind her father, almost hidden by the shadow of a tree, stood a man in a dark coat, not smiling, not looking at the camera, just watching. A stranger she had never noticed before. "Who is that?" she whispered. "The reason everything happened," Daniel said. Her throat tightened. "I don't understand." "You will," Daniel said softly. "But first, you need to remember the night of the accident." Eleanor shook her head immediately, tears rising. "No, I don't want to remember. I've spent years trying to forget." "You have to," Daniel said, gripping her hands, "because the truth is hiding in the memories you pushed away, and without them we're walking blind." Eleanor's breath came in shallow gasps. The room seemed to close in around her. She hadn't revisited that night in years, not because she couldn't, but because she was afraid of what she might see if she did. "I can't," she whispered. "You can," Daniel insisted, his voice breaking. "Eleanor, they took your family. They tried to take mine. If we don't fight this, if you don't face the past, more people will get hurt." Her tears finally spilled. She squeezed her eyes shut, her voice shaking. "Why me? Why is this happening to me?" Daniel gently touched her cheek. "Because you're the only one left who can uncover the truth." Eleanor's heart pounded. She looked down at the photograph again, and suddenly a flicker of memory surfaced. A flash of headlights, her mother's scream, a figure standing in the road, the sensation of falling, darkness swallowing everything. Her entire body tensed. I remember something," she whispered. Daniel leaned forward, desperate in his eyes. "Tell me." But Eleanor was trembling too hard to speak. The memory had hit her like a wave, cold, violent, devastating to touch. And she knew there would be more, much more.
Eleanor sat frozen in the dim basement room, her hands shaking uncontrollably as the fragment of her memory echoed through her mind. The warmth of the lamp seemed to fade, replaced by a coldness that settled deep in her chest. Daniel watched her closely, afraid to push her too hard, yet knowing time was slipping away like water through cupped fingers. The silence stretched between them until Eleanor finally managed to speak, though her voice cracked with strain. I saw something," she whispered. "Just a flash, headlights, and someone standing in the road." Daniel leaned forward, his expression tightening. "A man?" Eleanor nodded weakly. "The same man in the picture?" I don't know," she said, pressing a trembling hand to her forehead. "It all happened so fast. My mother screamed. I remember reaching for her hand, and then everything went dark." Her voice faltered. "I woke up in the hospital. They told me the car lost control on the wet road. A tragic accident." Daniel's jaw tightened. That's what they wanted you to believe. Eleanor flinched at his words. It was strange. After years of quiet grief, the idea that her parents' deaths were not random felt like a second loss, sharper and more brutal than the first. Her heart ached like it hadn't in years. "Daniel, who are they?" she asked, her voice strained with fear and exhaustion. "You keep saying that word like I should know, but I don't. I don't understand any of this." Daniel hesitated, his fingers brushing the edge of the metal box. "If I tell you now, before you remember everything you need to—" He paused, searching for the right words. "You won't believe me." "Try me," Eleanor whispered. Daniel exhaled slowly. It was not the sigh of someone tired. It was the sigh of someone preparing to reveal a truth that could never be taken back. "They're called the Meridian Order," he said. "A group of people with power, political, financial, social. They operate behind the scenes, influencing events, controlling outcomes. They don't like unpredictability. They don't like loose ends." "Why would they care about my family?" Eleanor demanded, her fear now tangled with anger. "We weren't important. We didn't have anything." Daniel shook his head gently. "That's where you're wrong." He reached into the box again and pulled out a folded document. When he opened it, Eleanor saw her father's name at the top, typed neatly across an official-looking header. Recognition struck her like a sudden blow. "This is my father's handwriting," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "These are notes from one of his investigations." Eleanor stared at him, stunned. "My father wasn't an investigator. He worked at a shipping firm." "That's what he wanted you to believe," Daniel said softly. "Your father was working undercover, secretly, quietly. He was gathering information on the Meridian Order, and he got closer to the truth than anyone ever expected." Eleanor's breath caught. Her father, quiet, gentle, predictable, secretly fighting a powerful organization? It seemed impossible. And yet, she remembered the late nights, the phone calls he stepped outside to take, the locked drawer in his desk she was never allowed to touch. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "If he was doing something dangerous, why wouldn't he tell us?" "Because he wanted to protect you," Daniel replied gently. "Because if you didn't know, they wouldn't come after you." Eleanor blinked away tears that blurred her vision. "But they did come after us." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "Yes." The weight of that truth broke something inside her. She felt raw, like a wound reopened after years of scarring. Her hands curled into fists against her lap. "And what about your family?" she asked quietly. "What do they have to do with all this?" Daniel hesitated, and for a moment the room felt weightless, suspended. He finally said, "My father was working with yours. They were partners, friends, and both of them were getting too close to answers the order didn't want anyone to find." Eleanor's breath trembled. "What happened to your parents?" There was a long pause. Daniel swallowed hard. "They disappeared. No bodies, no explanation. One night they were home, and the next, gone." Eleanor felt sick. The cruelty of it made her chest tighten until she could barely breathe. "And what about you?" she whispered. "What did they do to you?" Daniel's eyes darkened with pain, the kind that didn't come from wounds on the skin, but from years of fear and control. "They took me," he said simply. "They made sure I couldn't speak to anyone. They kept me under surveillance, told me if I ever tried to look for answers, the same thing that happened to my parents would happen to you." His voice grew tight. "That's why I stayed away."
Eleanor's heart twisted at the thought of Daniel carrying that burden alone, locked away, threatened, silenced, and suddenly something shifted inside her. A spark of resolve, born from sorrow but fueled by something stronger. Determination. "So everything I've believed for 16 years was a lie?" she whispered. Daniel reached for her hand, gently this time, careful not to overwhelm her. "Not everything," he said softly. "Your memories of them, your love for them, those were real. That's why the Order feared your father, because he had something they don't, a reason to fight." Eleanor bit back a sob. Tears spilled anyway. "I can't do this," she said, shaking her head. "Daniel, I'm not like my father. I'm not strong or brave. I've spent years hiding from the world. I can't suddenly become someone who fights powerful organizations." Daniel's expression softened with a kind of sadness that felt almost protective. "You don't have to be strong alone. You have me, and you have the truth. That's more than they ever expected you to have." Eleanor looked down at the photograph still in her hand, her family smiling, the shadowy man behind them, the life she thought she understood now unraveling at its seams. And then she remembered something else. Something she had buried so deep she didn't know how it surfaced now. A voice. A whisper. Her father's voice the night before the accident. "If anything happens to us, Ellie, don't trust anyone who comes asking questions." Her breath hitched. "Daniel," she whispered, I think I remember something else." Daniel's eyes widened. "What is it?" But before she could answer, before the words formed on her lips, a loud, sharp noise echoed from above. Footsteps. Heavy ones. Daniel shot to his feet, his eyes fierce with sudden alarm.
The heavy
"They found
footsteps
us."
thundered above them, shaking the dusty light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the table covered in documents. The room seemed to shrink around her, the air thick with fear. "Don't make a sound," Daniel whispered sharply. Eleanor nodded, though her entire body trembled. Her thoughts raced. How did they find us so quickly? Were they following Daniel? Had she led them here? Questions crashed through her mind like waves, but there was no time to think. The footsteps grew louder, slow, deliberate, searching. Daniel moved swiftly across the room and pressed his ear against the bottom of the staircase door. Eleanor watched him, her heart pounding so hard she feared it might echo through the silence. He turned back to her, voice barely audible. "There are at least 2 of them. Maybe 3. Eleanor's breath hitched in her throat. "What do we do?" Daniel scanned the room. "There's a back exit, but it's small and loud. They'll hear us. So we wait? We let them find us?" Daniel shook his head, eyes narrowing with determination. "Not if we move carefully." But before he could say another word, a sudden sharp knock echoed through the wooden door above them. Bang, bang, bang. Eleanor flinched, her hands instinctively rising to cover her ears. A deep voice followed, muffled by the door but unmistakably cold. "Daniel Hale, we know you're in there. Open the door." Daniel froze, jaw clenched so hard Eleanor feared his teeth might crack. The voice continued. "You've caused enough trouble. Don't make this worse." Eleanor looked at Daniel, her panic rising. "They know your name." "They always did," he whispered bitterly. "They just pretended otherwise." Eleanor felt her knees weaken. This was real. Everything he'd said, all the warnings, all the fear in his eyes was not paranoia. These people were real, and they wanted him, and now her. Another knock, louder, more violent. "We won't ask again." Daniel grabbed Eleanor's hand. His grip was firm, protective, but trembling with urgency. "We're leaving, now." He pulled her toward the far corner of the room where an old metal shelf stood against the wall. Daniel shoved it aside with surprising strength, revealing a narrow gap in the bricks, a hidden exit barely half a meter wide. "You first," he whispered. Eleanor stared into the gap. It was dark, claustrophobic, cold, but the footsteps upstairs were growing more restless, and the door shook under the pressure of someone testing it. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She crawled into the narrow passage, feeling the rough bricks scrape her arms. Daniel followed right behind her, closing the shelf just enough to hide the gap. The passage was long, tight, and filled with the stale smell of old stone. Eleanor forced herself forward on shaking hands and knees, each movement echoing softly off the walls. Daniel whispered behind her, "Keep going. Don't stop." She didn't. She couldn't. Above them, the door finally gave way. A crash echoed through the room they had just escaped from. Heavy boots thudded across the floor. Voices filled the space, sharp, commanding, ruthless. Eleanor froze. Daniel whispered urgently, "Don't stop, Ellie. Move." She forced herself forward. The tunnel sloped downward, then curved sharply before opening into a small underground drainage chamber. Dim moonlight filtered through a rusty grate above. Eleanor stumbled to her feet, gasping for breath. Daniel emerged behind her and quietly closed the hidden passage. He took her hand again, gently this time, and looked into her frightened eyes. "We're safe for the moment, but they'll search every exit. We have to keep moving." Eleanor swallowed hard. "Where do we go?" Daniel exhaled, his face shadowed with worry. "There's someone we need to meet. Someone who knows more than I do." He hesitated, "but getting to her won't be easy." Eleanor tightened her grip on his hand, surprising herself with the sudden burst of courage. "Daniel, who were those people? Why do they want you so badly?" Daniel looked at her with a sadness that made her stomach twist. "Because I stole something from them," he said quietly. "Something they never wanted anyone to see." Eleanor felt the air leave her lungs. "What did you steal?" Daniel held her gaze for a long moment before answering. "A file," he whispered. "One your father risked everything to protect." Eleanor's heart dropped. "My father? Left something behind?" Daniel nodded slowly. "And the order would kill to get it back."